My name is Alex Milbert. I'm on the solutions engineering team here at Affinity, and I am joined by the legendary Casey Rovinelli. Awesome.
I'll take it. Sure.
We can use our clicker. Perfect. All right. So just to cover a quick agenda, we're going to go over a quick history of OMERS Ventures and the partnership with Affinity. We'll dive more into what a tech stack is, because that's obviously why we all came here today. That's what gets me up in the morning. That's literally all I spend my days thinking about. And so I want to push that emphasis and energy back onto you guys. We'll go through some lessons and best practices, cover some Q&A, and talk about the future state of where we're going. Awesome. So a little bit more about OMERS Ventures. OMERS Ventures is the venture arm of OMERS, one of the largest pension plans in all of Canada. Let's see here. They're one of the most, they're basically what I like to say, they're technology focused and founder driven. Some notable exits include Shopify, Wattpad, and Wave, with additional investments being Rover, which my dogs love, by the way, and Crunchbase. So Casey is the director of growth, where he oversees two teams across, he oversees two Affinity instances and over 80 users. So he's a big time power user. Has over 19 years of experience working on creating digital platforms, and he's really been super focused on optimizing OMERS tech stack. Casey, anything additional you want to add?
No, sounds good. Just happy to be here. We're big fans of Affinity. Reasonably early days. I don't think as early as Bain Capital folks, but pretty early.
Yeah, he's seen a lot of growth. Cool. So let's. All right. Can we go to the next slide, please? Perfect. All right, so let's talk about the, looks like we need to go back here. Awesome. So let's talk about what a tech stack is. This is the bread and butter of everything. So what do we mean when we say a tech stack? A tech stack can have a myriad of definitions and technologies that can comprise of one, whether you're super focused into engineering or more high level when it comes to private capital. So when we say tech stack, what we're talking about is a culmination of technologies working together to help people do their jobs better. I'm just going to emphasize that because that's really what it's all about. A culmination of technologies working together to help people do their jobs better. Because obviously at the end of the day, we all want to do our jobs better. So this is not a tech bundle. This is not a tech cluster, but the emphasis is on the tech stack, meaning that everything is working together. All of the components are seamlessly working together in order to bring more value, automation, and ease of use to you as the end user. So depending on your business, depending on your focus, you might not need all of these things, but what we've outlined here is throughout my history at Affinity, all of our engineers working together, what we see in the private capital space, a tech stack normally is comprised of your CRM, your scheduling tool, your email automation tool, task management tool. So a challenge that I love for the audience, for those online and everyone watching, is that given that these are the tools that we see across the space, has your firm looked at all of the cost benefits in terms of these tools, and do you have all of them implemented? All right, so first off, I should ask you, anything additional you'd like to add to the tech stack?
No, I think it's good that you emphasize that it's all this tech stack is in service of helping our investors do a better job. I think the sort of occupational hazard of having tool people around is that we get kind of enamored with our own tools. And listen, I love technology for technology's sake, but at the end of the day, I think just the perspective I bring to OMERS, I think, is having been 20 years digital marketing and building product, that you kind of, I have to force myself every day, to be fair, to focus on what's the end use case, what business objective are we serving, like who are we helping, what's the user, and sort of start there and then say, okay, now what data do we need, how do we pipe it in the right way? Yeah. So it's always something I try and keep in mind.
There's definitely something to be said about getting too lost in the weeds, that technical component. Yeah, I see that all the time.
That's why I do it at night and on the weekends.
Yeah.
But day job, deliver value.
Especially as an engineer.
We laugh, but I was like pulling stuff together on Airtable on my vacation. So I'm like, I'm bored. It's like my Sudoku.
I love that. So the outcomes, like what Casey was referencing, when you do get that tech stack in order, when everything's working efficiently, the train is humming along, it all comes down to connectivity and scalability. So connectivity, we can all kind of envision what that looks like. That means the data, your information, seamless transfer from system to system. Do you need 50 tabs open? No, you can have one. Eliminating that redundancy, eliminating manual data entry. And if this sounds familiar to what Affinity is all about, there's definitely that relationship there, because we're trying to bring in all that data into one place so that you don't have to look across all these disparate systems, and everything is in one place for you to be able to take actionable insights. And the scalability, well, obviously when all of your data, when all of your technologies are working together, you're going to be that much faster of a person. What I want to touch on here, I took a note on this actually, that it's just kind of an improv, that Eugene actually was talking about the pre-diligence signals that are used in the deal flow process. And I think there's something to be said there when it comes to scalability, because the more that your technology is able to help in that sense, I guess the easier it is to increase that deal velocity and stay in contact with more founders. Anything you'd like to add in terms of the outcomes? Okay, cool. I guess I'll have the clicker.
That's the audience participation section. Thank you.
Here, you can talk more.
You do great, man. It's great. Yeah. So Omer's, we've been with Affinity for 3 years. We're a 10, 11-year-old venture capital firm. Initially, just sort of like a Canadian generalist fund, and then 3 years ago we expanded a team into the Bay Area, and then a team in London. And so going from 3 partners, tight-knit team in one office, to 3 offices, lots of partners, lots of different styles of working, let's say. Having a sense of like who's talking to who, what's going on became more important. And surprise, our 10-year-old garbage Salesforce Classic instance just wasn't doing it, because, as you know, like nobody was putting anything into it. Doing a reasonable job tracking deals, but definitely not contacts. It just wasn't something we were doing very well, because we didn't have to. Everybody knew everybody. We did a terrible diversion. I'm just going to take a moment to diss one of your competitors. Dip into Microsoft Dynamics. Microsoft Dynamics is a great product, just isn't a good product for us. Again, doesn't resolve the issue of getting people to put stuff in. And I heard it in the other session that I think when I was pleading to the powers that be to get Affinity, one of the things I said is, listen, just get it, turn it on, and it's going to show value immediately, because at least we'll know who's talking to who across the different regions. But of course, we had a broader vision for Affinity. Affinity really was like, relationships are everything in venture. So having that as Affinity as a mother system that we can then build stuff off of was critical. So we've been really I don't know if Jason's in here. We have a love-hate relationship, I think, because I'm always pushing Jason, our success manager, to be like, hey, I wish you guys could do this in the API or that. So I think you guys like us, but okay, good. But yeah,
that's why you're here.
Oh, thank you. So super critical. Sounds easy, right? But investors, enterprise sales reps, they kind of share that common trait of not wanting to enter stuff into systems. I don't blame them. So
awesome. So,
oops, sorry.
Oh,
I hit the wrong button, guys. Sorry.
So I believe at this point, after we get the slides back in order, Casey is going to show us a presentation.
Just from a product standpoint, makes you wonder why they put a button like that on the presenter thing. Yeah, exactly.
I think if we just go to one of the first or second tabs, looks like that has the presentation open.
Any questions so far? You want to fire something out while we...
What's your favorite integration that you're using unless
What's my favorite integration with Affinity? I think we built, similar to Bain, we built our own sort of signals product, and figuring out how to sort of knit that back into Affinity. So we're extracting data from Affinity plus a bunch of other data, and then we're pushing it back into Affinity. I think that was pretty cool. But we do a decent amount of data enrichment within Affinity on top of what they already do too, and I think that's pretty wild. No, never manually, always automated. But it is interesting to see like the Zapier interface. I'll get into it, but like Zapier integration into Affinity is really good. So if you wanted like a light touch way to say, let's take data from Airtable and then flow it into Affinity through Zapier, it's pretty cool.
I can just say, just from my perspective, what I've seen in terms of greatest value add, some of our customers have really gotten a lot of value from Source Scrub. We've created custom one-off integrations using Source Scrub as a data source, and being able to feed that into Affinity, obviously has a lot of data power, similar to what we're doing with PitchBook or Affinity Data or Crunchbase. So it just goes to speak of the common theme of this conference, how the more data that we can aggregate into one place, like the more powerful it becomes for the investors. I mean, I think it's just better. Oh, sorry, for anyone online, the question was, what's the main value of the data with Source Scrub? And really, it's just another data source that that investors rely on and trust, maybe more than others. I think all these data companies out there in this space have different ways that they go about finding their data and sourcing it. So every investor has their own criteria in terms of which company they trust more.
Maybe while we're still doing this, show of hands, who's VC? Venture capital? Any private equity buyout folks? All right. Everybody's on Affinity, I would assume, because you're here. Dedicated, hands up, dedicated data person / team. Ish. Okay, good. Oh, amazing. I'm going to kill it if I get the slides up. You never know, because sometimes it's like you get a bunch of data engineers and it's like you're being too basic. Another question from the team?
I'm a super small new fund, two of us. We started with Affinity very early, but like haven't started to build out anything. So I'm curious about like the baby steps. Like I appreciate that. I think the data is obviously being really automated already, but like I know there's more we could be doing, and I just don't really know how to kind of think about going from 0 to 60, but incrementally.
Yeah. Tell you what, that's a great question. I touched on a little bit if we're back. Okay, sorry, we're not back yet. I think just looking at our own evolution, even my own evolution, playing around with data, like there was a time when it was kind of just me, and I'm like a decent product business logic kind of guy, but I'm not a data engineer. And we got really far with Zapier plus Airtable, and so the way it kind of works is you can connect Zapier is like a if this then that. It's like something happened over here and then you want me to do a few steps and then push some data somewhere else. It's very easy to set up with Affinity. You just need your API key, and then you can, once you get a sense of sort of like how it flows, you can do things like listen for when a deal goes from like stage A to B, and have that kick off like an email or something. And so I think Zapier as a sort of integrator, and then Airtable, when you get a little more sophisticated with it, as a database, but then also a bit of like business logic you can stick in there. So
it sounds like you're where. Sorry, I don't see his slides. This looks like the old deck. And just to
so in summary, thanks for coming.
I think that's the way that it should go. I think to speak to that though, what I've seen is primarily my function at Affinity is I build a lot of custom one-off integrations for our clients, and these asks are normally bigger than something like what a Zapier can handle. And so what's cool about this is that customers will come to us and they'll be at this stage where maybe for the past year or two, they've been doing stuff more with Zapier. And then they're like, now it's time to get bigger and better. And so it's like, let's take more applications, more complex APIs, and now let's all bring them all together into Affinity. And so seeing like what Casey was talking about, that crawl, walk, run approach is great, because you see with that familiarity, it just brings more, more automation, more productivity, more deal velocity. Yeah. Cannot do?
Yeah, cannot do.
Yeah. So the question was, can you give an example of stuff that Zapier cannot do? A great example is when you're talking about, I think, complex logic. So like if this then that is really great, but what if instead of it's if this and that, that is like 5 different other criterias? How do you establish that? How do you branch off and create those different sections? And so that's where you just need, sometimes it's just easier to dive into scripts, to dive into bigger integration platforms. Yeah.
It does tend to be sort of a single, they can do some conditionals too, but it tends to be single threaded, like something happened, I'm going to do a few things and then we're done. But you're right. Sometimes when you get more sophisticated at it, it's like I'm watching one feed and one of 30 things may happen. And depending on that, I want to do different things.
So I'm a former entrepreneur turned venture capitalist, and I think one of the things that frustrates me the most is things that I think there should be answers to, that the world knows, that I am seeking for. So what I sense is in venture, there's remarkable amount of bespoke process development in terms of specific to, and it seems that you guys as Affinity should be taking that bespoke and like saying, hey, this is really the better way of doing it, and kind of narrowing. Now you can't do it quickly, but so I'm curious, like I don't want to spend time thinking about how to do this best. I want the world to tell me how to do portfolio management best, or pipeline management, and so I'm just, how do you think about, thoughts on that comment?
Yeah, about once a quarter, I get the dreaded comment, which is, hey, this stuff you built is really cool. Maybe we should commercialize it. Having somebody who's only a venture capitalist would say something like that, right? Because like, no, it's actually really hard. I think you're right in that, to use a VC term, TAM's pretty small. There's only so many of us venture capitalists. We tend to be a little bit cheap because of our fee structure. We have to be. But then we also are incredibly bespoke. We have different processes. So I actually agree that I think Affinity, to the extent that you're pushing deeper into this market, could do more stuff. Some of the stuff that we built on top of Affinity could be in Affinity. Like clicking buttons to do next action, or we're all doing our data-driven sourcing, and we're really constrained in terms of like getting it into a list means we have to we're beholden to the list structure, to the point where like you can't even do Boolean sometimes. So it's like we're flipping flags on and off, and I'm like, what are we doing here? Let's just get it out. But it's, the good news is it's been nice watching you guys. You guys are you're one of those tools, just like Airtable, which I think people love you guys, and so when you release something that's awesome, it's like people care, as opposed to some other tools where it's like, oh, whatever. Yeah, that's great. Nice. You have a button there. But. Yeah. So keep it up, Alex.
Thank you. Well, I think the slides are working now, so we can dive into your presentation.
I was going to say, could you imagine if I hit the button again?
I think they would just leave.
Everybody just gets up, walks out. Okay, so it's I just have a few slides just to sort of set context of what we've been building, but I think it's really important. I love that you set off the talk like this. It's important to understand that, like, me as a product guy, we're in service of our investment group. Like, and we're just like I did when I was building sales and marketing funnels and machines, and I'm enabling salespeople, I'm enabling investors here. And so my team is really charged with doing one of two things: either increasing the efficiency of the investment team, like getting rid of some of that busy work and stuff, and having ideally the data at their fingertips and its logical next actions. Eugene's here, so he knows that I don't always. We're still growing, right? And then also delivering insights. Okay, so when you're talking to venture capitalists, product people, developers, it's a big spectrum of like what is this thing that we're building? and I struggled to describe it in a way that like everybody can kind of understand. So I'm sort of doing a bit of an experiment here. So tell me if I landed or not. But using simple building blocks, basically this whole, whenever you hear signals or all this stuff that we're talking about, it's like there's data out there. There are sources. That data, but data just sitting there alone doesn't mean anything. It needs to be processed, which means code or Zapier or like taking information, processing it either into a report or enriching a database. But there's just application layer stuff going on. And then at the end of the day, we have to remember that there's an interface. And so when, depending on who you're talking to, you talk to the tech people, I start with sources and then go to interfaces. If I'm talking to the investors, it's like, here are your interfaces and what they do. And if they care to know, I'll go backwards to tell them how we get the data to them. But there's 3 big buckets, and then across all of that is orchestration. And so that's like, how do I get data from Crunchbase's daily flat file into a table that then can be used in other systems? And at OMERS, Ventures, we tend to use 3 sort of big buckets of data. So it's like market and people data that you guys are probably all buying to various degrees. I can't underscore enough how important internal data is to be made available into this ecosystem of analysis. And this is things like if you're getting KPIs from your portfolio companies, even an investment fund information, or even just something as basic as we have an Airtable of all of our staff and what region they're in and who they are, what they invest in, blah, 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 blah. The other data is like run a live stream. So it's we could talk after about some of the really interesting things we're using with the public web, but that's certainly something I can talk to you over beers. We tend to process our data in one of 3 ways. It's either signals, which is, we're monitoring for people leaving companies, going to other companies. We're monitoring things like portfolio companies of investors that we co-invest in, what's going on with their portfolio companies, so we know if their web traffic is going up or down. So if one of our investors is talking to the other investor, they come prepared. We do a decent amount of like self-reflection on our own portfolio company in terms of like keeping an eye on reviews, keeping an eye on traffic, keeping an eye on people movements. And it's all, again, in service of making our investors better, faster, quicker. Relationships, a lot of that processing is Affinity. This is like who knows who has the strongest relationship. But we're increasingly starting to play with what can we do on top of that to enrich things. So something as simple as who do we co-invest with? Or on this company, what's the quickest path to the founder through another investor that we have a relationship with? That's some of the processing we're starting to do. And then reporting is really stuff like deal flow analysis. We tend to export a lot out of Affinity through the API, and then building up our own sort of reporting stack. And then ultimately, like data that's processed that doesn't actually end up in a system of action is kind of useless. So Affinity is obviously one of the main tools that our team is in, but we've built out our own web application as well to do some of the workflow analysis around, or the workflow around signals or reporting. We tend to like to use lighter tools like high charts or AG grid as opposed to a proper sort of like business intelligence tool. And then I'll talk about operations in a sec, but we have another platform that we use to make sure that like with all of this data, if we're spitting out next actions or if we need a human to do something, there's actually a system that can capture that request and then make sure the human does it. So, questions so far on that one? If you sort of, I'll keep going. Otherwise, green button. Got it. Okay. So yeah, nailed it. So, so what does that look like? So let's take an example of like G2 Crowd, right? And this is where it's like, okay, set the framework and then show me how you're doing. All kinds of data. It's decent source of data. And so we'll take stuff like, for different thematic areas, we're monitoring company page views on G2 Crowd. All kinds of reasons why that's kind of an interesting signal. We're processing that as a signal, looking for new companies that might be interesting, but but then we're also ingesting some of the other data. So we're looking at like, time to implementation or churn, customer reviews, NPS scores, that kind of stuff, and putting that into reports for the purposes of not just doing signals, but also like we're really trying to have that. Sort of the holy grail for us is the investor can come to a one pager, enter the company, and then we're going to spit out absolutely everything and give them a bit of like sort of pre-diligence so they can move a little faster. But also, again, we're looking at our portfolio companies quite a bit. So the big takeaway here really is that like this is an ecosystem. We have to think of this stuff as ecosystems, and you never just like never take a data source unless you know what you're going to do with it. I'm guilty of that. But hey, so it's actually a little fun tip too, that like when you tell that to data vendors who are always trying to get you to buy data, if you tell them like, listen, I could buy you, but I wouldn't know what to do with you yet. We're not ready. Call me in 6 months. Everybody tends to respect that. So it's an ecosystem, and it's not just one sort of data source does one thing. We have to really think about like corralling it all into an ecosystem of data. And like, all right. So like tech. If we have tool guys and gals here, it's like everybody wants to talk logos. So this is sort of where we started-ish, but also just like, hey, with using a reasonable amount of like not too expensive no code, low code, you can do a lot to be dangerous. So it's, Affinity is obviously one of those sort of like mother systems for relationships. It's a mother system for, you should be using it for like deal flow and using the Affinity triggers to capture, progressively capture more information about deals. But it doesn't have to stay in Affinity. You can use it in other systems. And so, take Product Hunt, take Crunchbase, Affinity, a couple other different sources of data. Use Zapier to sort of like move it around. Use Airtable to manipulate it in sort of like what I can only describe as like if a spreadsheet in a database had a baby, it'd be Airtable. I don't know if they sanction that slogan or not, but and then again, always thinking through what's that system of action. You're munging through some data. Where does it go? What do you want somebody to do with it? Insight for insight's sake is useless. Where we're at now is we hit that limit where we're like, okay, we need to do a bit more code, and so we're Python. We try and do as much Python-y code stuff as we can. But basically, like, hey, Affinity is still a great data source. We're also doing a whole bunch of other purchasing a bunch of other data, grabbing other data off the public internet as well, and then we still use Airtable for quite a bit, but you get to a certain point where you need proper sort of SQL databases depending on how much data you're ingesting. But the one tip for those of you who are a bit more codey, I would say is we used to use Airflow to orchestrate all of our Python scripts, but we've been moving to Prefect. Trust me, it's awesome. Check it out. And then Affinity is obviously one of our main systems of action. But as I mentioned before, we've invested in a new company called NextMatter. And NextMatter is an operations automation platform. And so it's every process that we have in our business, whether it's employee onboarding to post term sheet sign diligence, IC committee processes, we're going to stick into NextMatter, and it basically breaks down each process into discrete, almost like Zapier does with tasks. It does it for like human interactions, and so it's like, okay, has a term sheet been signed? Yes. It kicks off a flow. Okay, what's next? Well, we have to. Claire and legal has to start the ESG diligence process, and we need to prepare a memo to get the money to pay for these guys. And so there's really two benefits of getting that as a human system of action. One is it's just a lot more efficient. So people, we have all kinds of processes. The amount of processes in the venture capital world was one of the things that shocked me. It was just amazing that it all works because there's so many steps. So yeah, keeping that all in a tool, keeping it efficient, everybody knows what they're doing, which I think improves employee satisfaction too. But also the sooner you can get a process into the digital world, the easier it is to extract data. So it's, hey, investor XYZ, you want $10 million? No problem. I need to know what the post-money valuation is and whether we have a board seat, and just go ahead and input it in there. I think that's sort of another tip of mine, is that, ask of the user when they really, really want something from you. So if you're moving a deal stage and they got to go into diligence, okay, now ask a few more things. Don't do it up front. Like, be really prescriptive about when you ask for things, and Affinity has great functionality around that.
It's true. Those data insights have a lot of payoff in the long run. I'm just curious, from the group of people that are here, if you go back to that slide, is there anyone else, when it comes to the journey of digital transformation, is there anyone else that feels like they're at a similar stage here? Yeah. Okay, so we do have some. That's great to know. Thank you.
And to your point, it's interesting you mentioned the sort of bespoke nature of some of it. That's I was going to skip over it, but that's our web app right there. And it's a nice light little tool, Vue.js. We use Python and Flask in the background. I mean, when we first got started, the database was like CSV files on a server, so you can do it. But yeah, it would be interesting to see. I haven't seen a true like system of action that handles all the things that we might need. But sorry, any other questions on that?
Yeah, so like the business changes so quickly. I wonder about the idea of building a single system of action that encompasses all the workflows and all the activities, because they're going to change by the time my team codes them and puts them in. One of the investment teams has moved on, and then we're start to move apart. So I wonder, like, have you really decided that you do want to try to consolidate, or are you ending up with a few different tools or a few different systems that are more flexible?
That's an amazing question. I actually think there will never be the perfect product suite, and so we've just admitted that and said we've structured everything in a way that we're taking the best point solution to do the thing that we need it to do. And where it ends, as long as it has a clean API where I can get data out of, push and pull, then that's good. And so I think, I think that's where we are. We're able to pivot quite a bit, because we did roll our own code for a lot of the front end and for the worker sort of agents. The other interesting thing that came to mind just listening to you ask the question was, you're right. It's like the hard work isn't necessarily the building. It's the sticking around and the customer success and onboarding and internally to make sure people are using it. And actually, it's a pretty good segue, because I have a bullet point there, which is carrot and stick, and it's like we use that quite a bit. Where it's like, if you want a human to do something, the carrot is like, come on, I made this thing and it's beautiful and it makes your life 40% easier at work. That's the carrot. So just use it, please. The stick is, I've also created a report that the head of the fund sees every week. Or it's like there's a Monday meeting, and this is now, we've created a screed where we take a bunch of inputs, and then it will be called up on the Monday meeting in front of all the partners. And so if you don't have your thing in, then, so stick. But it's a very good point that it's like, this stuff needs constant care and feeding. But we're lucky at Omer's Ventures that we have the partnership is pretty interested in this kind of stuff, and they're committed to product and data. So we have to be our ambitions in terms of what kind of a fund we're going to be, geographically, size of assets under management. We can't hire 40 associates, so we're going to do it with tech.
Just a question about discovery. I know search is hard. I've implemented and failed at trying to beat Google at search for many years with my software teams. But all I want is all of my raw text searchable and across my Gmail and Affinity and in a way that surfaces sort of unique. And so I don't know. I'm sure that I know as an engineering team you get hit with that all the time. But I literally just want all the data on a Google appliance and returning results. And so how do you think about that? And then how do you, since you've implemented solutions around it, I have to go to Gmail first, and then I go into Affinity to get the extra data to find the thing in Affinity, and it just seems silly.
Yeah, I'd add to that. Like if we could record all of the Zoom calls and get that free text in there, and yeah, I think the broader sort of theme there is knowledge management. Like this is relationship management, but the knowledge management in terms of not even just getting the free text, but then also adding the sort of like graph context around it of like this entity was mentioned 15 times on European calls, and hey, it's actually a US company and we're talking to them. Like, yeah, I don't know if you got an answer for that, but it's on the roadmap, but it's a ways away.
Yeah, what I see is that it just shows that there's an initiative when it comes to data processing that needs to be given its proper due diligence, where we can't just take all of the data and push it in, but we have to process it so that we can understand it in a way that we can take actionable insights on it. A lot of customers don't quite get that, and so they want it all. And that creates pain points when you're trying to create that solution, when you really need this huge middle engine in order to properly feed it in. Yeah.
So we have 30 seconds left. I think we'll finish on this slide.
Yeah.
Just having built a lot of product, I think time to value is so important. I've actually talked to a lot of our colleagues, other VC firms, who I have sort of like envious about the amount of data scientists that they have, and then you ask the question, it's like, cool, man, have you done a deal yet? And they're like, are you kidding me? The investors don't even look at this stuff. And it's like, then why are you doing it? So, start small. It may seem benign, but it's like focus on time to value. Definitely, to your point, ecosystem over a suite. Stay nimble. Drive to action, not just insights. Insights are good, but it should be like, what action are you in service of? And then, carrot and stick. I love. Tie all the human inputs into a process, like get it around an existing workflow, whether it's the Monday meetings or whatever. To my mind, if it's not in a system, it doesn't exist. So the sooner we can get data into these systems, the easier, the better all our lives will be. And I think we're out of time.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rick.